Recovery from identity crisis means stepping back into community. But what happens when those communities feel like high school cliques all over again? In this episode, we'll explore the lost art of asking questions as a radical tool for authenticity, connection, and navigating the social landmines of group dynamics. Because curiosity isn't just a communication skill, it's a survival skill.
Audio Jungle.
Okay, let me paint you a picture. You've done the work, you've been in therapy, you're journaling, maybe sitting with a coach or a mentor. You peeled back the layers. You've looked at yourself in the mirror and start to recognize the person staring back at you again. You've come a long way. And then you decide to step back out into the world, into a community, into friendships, into a group, a gym, a hobby club, a social circle, and something strange happens. It feels familiar, but sometimes not in a good way. It feels like walking back through the front doors of your high school. There's that group that has it all together, or at least acts like it. There's the one that's edgy, a little loud, operating by a different set of rules. There's that face-based crowd who seems to have a filter for everything. The social butterflies. The ones who are nice, but you're not always sure if the nice is real. And sometimes in the middle of this, there's you, stronger than before, but also asking yourself, where do I fit in? Who are my people? And how do I stay me when every group seems to have an unwritten rule book about who you're supposed to be inside it? Well, that's what we're unpacking today on Stronger Than Before. I'm your host, and in this episode, it's for every person who's worked hard to find themselves, only to feel like the social world is asking them to lose themselves again. We're going to talk through the lost art of asking questions, not just as a communication tool, but as the number one strategy for remaining authentic, navigating group dynamics, and building the kind of connections that actually sustain you rather than drain you. So let's go. So I'm going to set the stage. Identity crisis and the return to community. First, let's acknowledge something that doesn't get said enough. Coming back to community after an identity crisis is hard. When you've gone through the kind of internal earthquake that reshapes who you are, whether that was a divorce, a loss of a career, a health crisis, grief, or simply waking up one day and realizing you had no idea who you actually were beneath all the roles you've been playing. Stepping back into a social space can feel a little disoriented because here's the thing about community. It has a memory, and it has a memory of who you used to be. And people, even well-meaning ones, will often relate to the version of you that they already know. They expect certain reactions from you. They fill in your sentences. They'll assume your opinions. They'll slot you back into a role you used to play. And if you changed, if you've grown, if you shed some of the old skin and you're walking around in something new, well, that can feel a little bit like friction. And sometimes that friction is uncomfortable. Sometimes it's quietly painful, but sometimes it even feels like rejection, even when no one is being explicitly cruel. And then to the reality that most social groups, whether you're talking about a Bible study, a gym class, a book club, PTA, network group, work team, recovery group, friend circle. Everybody operates with their little bit of ecosystems. They have unspoken norms. They have social hierarchies. They have in-jokes and histories and shared language. And they have people who set the tone and the people who follow it. And for someone in the middle of reconstructing their identity, walking into that can feel like you're a transfer student in the middle of junior year. It can feel exactly like high school. Now, is that a bad thing? Is that a sign you need to leave? Or is that a sign these people are toxic? All of these questions are in your head. Not necessarily. And that nuance is exactly what I want to explore today. Because sometimes the high school feeling and sometimes it's a signal about us. And sometimes, most of the time, it's both. So let's talk through the high school archetypes, just so we can name what we see. Now let's have some fun with this for a second, because I think naming it takes away from some of the power it has over us. It's just like the stronger foundation. You need to separate from the event. So think about the classic high school social map. You have The mean girls, the ones who wielded social approval like a weapon, inclusion and exclusion were their currency. They could make you feel like the most important person in the room one day and then completely invisible the next. You had the jocks, the achievers, the status oriented ones. Everything was a competition. Respect was earned through performance. Weakness was not safe to show. You also have the stoners, the counterculture crew. They rejected the mainstream and prided themselves on not caring what anyone thought. But ironically, they cared a lot, just in different things. Conformity inside the nonconformist group was just as real. You had the nice girls. I put this in quotes deliberately, the ones who were sweet and pleasant on the surface, but whose niceness sometimes came with conditions. Be nice back, stay in the lane, don't rock the boat. And then you have the faith-based girls, if you're a Christian or if you follow any other type of value-driven framework, they are always part of the group. These are the ones who had a strong moral framework, which could be generally beautiful, but which could also tip into judgment, could tip into a purity culture presence or a subtle we're better than energy. But here's the thing. Every single one of these archetypes exists in adult community spaces. The mean girls becomes the social gatekeepers of the neighborhood group or the sorority adjacent friend circle. And you have the jocks, they become the overachievers in the professional networking group or the fitness community that's secretly more than body image competition than health. You have the stoners, they become the alternative crowd, the we don't do the mainstream group. That has just as rigid as a set of rules, just different ones. You have the nice girls, they become the conflict avoiders in small groups, book clubs, churches, where everyone smiles, but no one says actually what they think. And then you have the Christian girls or the faith-based girls. And they're often the ones with the most genuine hearts, but who can also sometimes create more pressure to conform to a specific identity script. None of these groups are inherently good or bad. They're all just human. But when you're in the process of rebuilding yourself and when you're stronger than before, but still tender in places, navigating these dynamics can feel like a minefield. So what do you do? Well, the real problem is we stop asking questions. And here what I want to introduce you to an idea that I think is generally life-changing. I've been sitting with this article recently. It's called The Lost Art of Asking Questions. And it kind of stops me in my tracks because the author, who is me, makes this argument. We live in a world where everyone has opinions and no one is asking questions. We broadcast, we perform, we defend, we position. And somewhere in all of that noise, we lost the practice of genuine curiosity. Now, why does that matter in the context of social groups and identity recovery? Because here's what happens when we don't ask questions. We make assumptions, and assumptions are where identity goes to die. Think about it. When you walk into a new social group or return to an old one, you feel that high school energy. What's actually happening in your brain? You're pattern matching. You're looking at the social cues, the body language, the one who talks to whom, the tone of the conversation. You're rapidly constructing a narrative. You're deciding who these people are. You're deciding where you fit. You're deciding whether it's safe to be yourself. And here's the kicker. Most of the time, that narrative is built almost entirely on assumptions. The woman who seems cold and judgmental, well, she might be going through a devastating loss and has no idea how to let people in right now. How about the group that seems cliquey? They might have a history of just being burned by outsiders and they just are slow to trust. The person who has the Bible verse for every situation, they might generally be trying to offer comfort in the only language they know. And here's the reverse. You might be walking into your own armor. Keep in mind, we're going through identity crisis and we're removing it, and you have armor on. Your own defenses, your own story about what groups like this do to people. And what looks like authenticity might actually be a preemptive distance. But questions can break through all of that. Genuine, curious, open-hearted questions, not interrogation, not debate prep, not I'll ask a question so I can confirm what I already really think. None of that. It's being curious, real questions questions that start from a place of, I don't actually know this person yet. So, what curiosity actually does. Let's talk about what happens neurologically and relationally when we lead with curiosity. When you ask someone a genuine question, tell me more about that, or what led you to that perspective, or what does that mean to you? Several things happen. First, you give them the experience of being seen, not evaluated, not auditioned, not judged, seen. And in a world where most people are performing for social approval at all the times, being seen, generally seen, is rare. It's disarming. It creates the kind of safety that almost nothing else can. Second, you give yourself information. Instead of projecting your assumptions onto someone and relating to your projection rather than the actual human in front of you, you get real data. You get to discover who they actually are. And sometimes, often, that information is surprising. The person you wrote off turns out to be fascinating. The group you were ready to dismiss turns out to have depth you haven't seen yet. Or, and this is equally important, the information confirms your instinct that this group isn't actually a good fit for you right now. And you get to make that decision from a grounded, informed place rather than from fear or assumption. And third, and this is the one I want to spend some time on, curiosity protects your identity. This is counterintuitive, so stay with me. When we feel socially uncertain, when we're in the process of rebuilding who we are, there's a very strong pull to conform, to figure out what the group values and perform it, to mirror the people around us, to earn belonging by becoming what the group expects. But that's an identity trap. And the way out of it is not to be louder or more defensive or more take it or leave it about who you are. The way out is to stay curious. When you are generally curious about others, you're in a relational posture rather than a performative one. You're not on stage. You're at a table. You're not trying to win. You're trying to understand. And from that posture, you can fully engage with all of yourself without losing yourself. Curiosity is how you stay grounded in your own identity while remaining generally open to others. So a lot of questions are probably forming in your head. So I want to talk about one. It's called the authenticity question. Who am I in all of this? We're transforming through identity crisis, and I want to answer those questions. So let me ask you something directly. When you walk into a room full of people, a social group, a community gathering, what are you trying to do? Be honest with yourself. Are you trying to be liked? Are you trying to find your people? Are you trying to prove something to them or to yourself? Are you trying to disappear? Are you trying to belong? Are you trying to figure out if it's safe? There's no wrong answer here. All of these are natural. All of these are human. All of these make sense, especially for someone who's been through an identity upheaval. But here's what I want to offer. The pursuit of authenticity doesn't mean walking into every room and announcing yourself. It doesn't mean leading with your roughest edges. And it doesn't mean performing vulnerability or performing confidence or performing, I've done the work. Authenticity at its core is alignment. It's when who you are on the inside matches what you show on the outside. And the beautiful, slightly paradoxical truth is that you can't find that alignment by focusing on yourself. You find it by engaging with others. Because here's what happens when you're asking genuine questions, when you're curious about the people in front of you. You forget to perform. You forget to manage your image. You forget to calculate whether you've being perceived correctly. You just present, you engaged, and you be human. And in that space, in that unguarded, curious, genuinely interested space, the real you shows up. Not the you that you've constructed to survive a previous season, and not the you that the old group needed you to be, the actual, current, stronger than before you. Curiosity is one of the most powerful pathways to authenticity I've ever encountered. So let's talk through navigating group dynamics, because here's some practical tools. So we're going to get a little bit technical because I know some of you are in a specific situation right now and you've got a group or a community where you're feeling that high school energy and you need something you can actually use. So let me give you 5 practices. Practice 1 is you want to observe before you conclude. When you enter a group and feel that uncomfortable, this is giving me high school vibe sensations, you need to pause because you decide what this group is, giving yourself a period of genuine observation, not passive wallflower observation, active, curious observation. Who are the connectors? Who are the truth tellers? Who is the peacekeeper? Who is the person who seems a little bit out of place, just like you? In every group, even the most cliquey high schoolish groups, there are individuals who operate differently from the group's dominant culture, and those individuals are often your people. You won't find them if you write off the whole group in the first 2 meetings. You have to be curious about them. Practice number 2, ask one question per conversation. This sounds almost too simple, but try it. Every conversation you have in a new or challenging social environment, give yourself one question, one goal. Ask one curious question, not the polite question and not a surface question, a real question. What got you into this? What's been the hardest part of that for you? I'd love to hear more about what that means to you. One question and notice what opens up. Practice number 3 is get comfortable with the I don't know. One of the most powerful things you can say in a group that's pushing an identity script on you is a very, very calm, very grounded, I haven't figured that out yet. It's not defensive. It's not apologetic. It's just honest. When the fitness group is pushing a specific philosophy and it doesn't resonate with you, you don't have to perform agreement or perform defiance. You can just say, interesting. I'm still figuring out what works for me. The I don't know yet is an identity anchor. It keeps you honest without creating conflict. It gives you room to grow without pretending to be somewhere where you're not. Practice number 4 is distinguish between discomfort and danger. This one is crucial, especially for people in recovery from identity crisis. Not all discomfort is a red flag. Sometimes a group challenges you in a way that feels threatening to your sense of self, but that challenge is actually growth. It's exposure to perspectives that expand you. It's being around people who are different from you in ways that are ultimately interesting and enriching. Other time, the group is actually asking you to betray yourself, to be smaller, to hide something true about who you are, you to adopt beliefs or behaviors that generally conflict with your values. These questions, the questions to ask yourself, is this discomfort because I'm growing or because I'm shrinking? Growth discomfort is worth sitting with. It's the kind that when you lean into it with curiosity leads somewhere. Shrinking discomfort is a signal. It says something in this environment is incompatible with who I actually am. And that's information worth taking seriously. Practice 5 is hold your center lightly. This is perhaps the most advanced and the most important. Hold your identity, your values, your perspective, your sense of self with confidence and not without confidence. A confident identity says, I know who I am and I'm not afraid to encounter people who are different from me. I can be moved. I can be surprised, even changed by what I learn, but I am still me. A rigid identity says, I need everyone around me to affirm my self concept and everything that I do doesn't become a threat. The first one can walk into a room, can engage with the mean girls, the jocks, the faith-based girls, the whole spectrum with curiosity and groundness. But the second one is exhausted all the time because the whole world becomes either an ally or an enemy. Curious people hold themselves lightly. They can be themselves in any room because they're not performing, they're being. So when to stay and when to go? Now, I want to address this question, and I know it's in the back of some of your minds. Are these groups you should just leave? Yes and no. Let me be direct here. Not every group is worth staying in. Not every social circle environment is healthy. And one of these things that distinguishes someone who is generally stronger than before from someone who is just surviving is the clarity to know the difference. And here's some signs that a group is actually not for you. You consistently feel worse about yourself after spending time with them. Not challenged, not stressed, not uncomfortable in a grow way, generally less. You feel smaller, you feel dimmer. The group requires you to perform a version of yourself that doesn't exist. This is different from encouraging you to grow. This is demanding that you pretend, that you fake agreement, fake certainty, fake health or happiness or faith or identity. Authenticity is punished when you have to be honest with yourself. When you shared something true, it was used against you, dismissed, mocked, or met with withdrawal. The hierarchy is rigid and self serving. The group exists not to support its members, but to reinforce the power of the few people at the top. Your value to the group is conditional on how useful you are to those people. Your sense of self consistency erodes rather than grows in this environment. If any of these are constantly true, then I want to emphasize consistently because every group has a bad week. Every community goes through rough patches. Then leaving is not giving up. Leaving is wisdom. You are not required to stay in spaces that ask you to be less than you are. You are not required to figure out how to make a toxic group work for you. And you are not required to endure cruelty in the name of community. Sometimes the most powerful things you can do is leave quietly, without drama, without a farewell speech, without burning anything down, and simply direct your energy towards communities that deserve you. But this is important. Make sure you've done the curiosity work first. Make sure you're leaving because the group is generally incompatible with your well being, not because you're scared and not because it felt uncomfortable, and not because you made an assumption that turned out to be based on an incomplete information. Leave with clarity. Stay with curiosity. I want to zoom out for a moment and talk about something bigger. What we've been discussing today, curiosity, questions, navigating group dynamics, all of it points towards a deeper human practice. The practice of not needing everyone to be like you in order to feel okay about it. That is, I think, one of the most radical forms of personal freedom. When your identity is secure, when you know who you are, what you value, what you're rebuilding towards, you don't need people around you to validate it. You can be generally curious about someone whose worldview is completely different from yours. Not because you're going to agree with them, but because humans are interesting. The woman who leads with her faith, interesting. What does that faith actually mean to her? What does it cost her? What has it given to her? What happens in the quiet moments when faith is hard? The person who leads with performance and achievement, interesting. Where did that drive come from? What are you afraid of? What do they actually want recognition for? The one who seems to push everyone away, interesting. What happened to make closeness feel unsafe? When you can ask those questions, generally, without agenda, you stop sorting people into categories. You start seeing them as a whole, complex, unfinished humans just like you. And something extraordinary happens when we do that. We stop being afraid of each other. The mean girl loses her power because her power was always based on your belief that her approval mattered more than your truth. The rigid group, based on faith, is the ability to shame you because you're no longer trying to earn membership. You're trying to have a conversation. The achievement obsessed group loses its ability to trigger your insecurities because you're generally curious about why they care so much rather than privately competing with them. Curiosity is an equalizer. It puts you on the same human plane as everyone else, not above them, not below them, with them. So I have a challenge and a call to action for you. So here's the challenge for this week. I want you to pick up one social environment, one group, one community whose recurring gathering that's been giving you that high school feel. And I want you to spend 1 week approaching it differently. Instead of walking in with your defenses up, walk in with one question prepared. Not a question designed to expose anyone, and not a question designed to see if they pass some test. A real question, a question that reflects genuinely curiosity about a person in that group. Notice what happens. Notice whether the group starts to look different when you stop projecting a story onto it and start actually seeing the individuals inside out. Notice whether you feel different, whether you feel more grounded, more useful, more present. And notice whether you find even one person, maybe a person you completely overlooked who surprised you. And then notice what you were assuming before you asked the question. Notice the narrative your brain has already written. Notice how much of your experience of the group was actually a story you were telling yourself. Because one of the most important things that asking questions does for for identity recovery, for community, and for relationships is it reveals to us how much we've been living inside our own assumptions. Every time we step outside our assumptions and into genuine curiosity, we become a little bit more free, a little bit more ourselves, a little bit more stronger than before. So before we close, I want to say something to the person who came into this episode feeling really lost. Maybe you're doing the hard work of healing. Maybe you've done real progress. You can feel it. You know it. Even on those days where it doesn't look like much from the outside, you can feel it. And maybe the community piece is still the hardest part. Maybe every time you try to step back, it feels like the same old wounds get poked, like no one understands who you are now, like you just don't quite fit in anywhere, like you're forever going to be the outsider in every group. I want you to hear this. That feeling is not permanent. It's not a verdict on your worthiness of belonging, and it's not a sign that community isn't for you. It's a sign that you're in transition, and transitions are disoriented by nature. You're left one version of yourself behind, and then the new version, the one that's emergent, hasn't been fully introduced to the world yet. Curiosity is how you make that introduction, not just to others, but to yourself. Keep asking questions. Keep staying curious. Keep showing up, not as the person you used to be, and not as the person you think others need you to be, but as the person you are right now, with all of the becoming that's still in progress. The right communities will recognize that person. And in the meantime, you can honor every space you're in, even the messy, complicated high school adjacent ones, with a simple, radical, world changing act of genuine curiosity. Tell me more. That's where it starts. I'll see you next time on Stronger Than Before. If this episode resonates with you or somebody is challenged by entering into a community, please send them this episode. I would love for you to expand, and thank you again for being part of our place. I love everything about you. I love to hear from you. Share it with someone who's navigating the in-between season, someone who's done the work but still figuring out where they belong. Leave a review if the show meant something to you. And if there's a topic that you want to dig in, please reach out. You are not alone in this. Stronger Than Before is produced for people who are in the middle of a comeback story, not at the end of it. So wherever you are today, God, keep going.